gold. He wanted gold. And then he made a bag made out of gold, a key made out of gold, and it was ready. It was ready for him to take with him. And he kept it with him all the time. He went to the washroom, carried it with him, went to sleep. Of course, he didn't know when he was not going to die. Eventually the time came, then he had to die. He is standing in a lineup to go into heaven. And next was his turn. He goes to Meher who was sitting there to judge. Meher asked him, name? He says, Dayabai, Gandabai. Okay, so, and then Meher punches it in the computer, everything comes up. The guy says, okay, you are allowed in heaven, welcome. But wait a minute, what's in your hand? You can't bring anything here. Dayabai says, no, I have special permission. Okay, let's see, check it out on the computer. Sure enough, there is a note from Ervad Mirza saying that, yeah, he's allowed to bring one bag. Okay, Meher says, yeah, you are allowed to bring one bag. But there is also a note here, I have to inspect it. Okay, the guy says, here is a key, inspect it. Open the bag. And then he looks at it and he says, pavement? Why would you bring pavement to heaven? Heaven, streets are made of gold. That's the concept. So, the story says that, well, the wealth that we see here has no value in heaven. What do you do with gold in heaven? Nothing. So what do you use in heaven? What's the currency of heaven? Goodness, your good deeds, good life is your currency in heaven. Okay? So, how do we know what's heaven like? Nobody has gone to heaven and came back and told us what it is like there. But there is a person who did it. There is a person who went to heaven and hell and came back and told us what it is like. And that person is Arda-e-Viraf. Arda-e-Viraf. Arda-e-Viraf was the mobed during Sassanian times. About 3rd or 4th century. You know, our ancestors were very poor in marking down their work as to when they wrote it. So we don't really know when exactly he wrote his work. But we can judge that it was somewhere around 3rd or 4th century. In those days, the society wanted to know. Inquiring minds of those years wanted to know. They wanted to know quite a few things, but amongst them, 2 important questions that was bugging them. 2 very important questions. The first one, what is it like in heaven and hell? And the second question, it was a pretty interesting question, the second question. The second question was, all the prayers we say here after the person dies, what happens to them? Do they get lost in the mail somewhere? Or does it reach the person that's intended for? That's the second question. So 2 questions. So he was chosen amongst a lot of mobeds to go and find that out. That was his mission. So it appears that he had 7 sisters. It's not very clear. It just says 7 sisters were dependent on him. So we are not sure whether he had 7 wives who happens to be sisters, or he had 7 sisters of his own. Regardless, there were 7 sisters. Those 7 sisters objected for them to send this guy to heaven, because what if he doesn't come back? He likes it so much over there. So then they complained, and the mobeds in those days said that no, that's okay, we give you all the assurances that we can, that he will return. If something happens, we will look after you. So this mobed was given a special drink, narcotic of Vistach, a special drink that allowed him to leave his body and make this journey and come back and give us the intelligence. That was his mission. So the Dasturs in those days stayed with his body. They prayed, they did all sorts of things just to make sure that everything goes smoothly. So Arda-e-Viraf went on his mission for 7 days. 7 days. And then he came back and he wrote his observations and his findings in a book called Arda-e-Viraf Nameh. So, what did he find? Remember, he had how many missions? 2 missions. To find out what it is like over there, and secondly, that there were prayers reached there. So, he says that as he died, or as he went up, the first thing he observed, there was this beautiful, beautiful girl who greeted him. A beautiful girl, Aishwarya Rai, greeted him. So he asked this girl, "Who are you?" And the girl said, "I am your character. I am your deeds. The good things that you have done is me. And I am going to guide you through this journey." If you read a book recently written by Dr. Alexander, Proof of Heaven, an American, I think he's a cardiologist, I'm not sure, but he's a doctor, and he had a near-death experience. In his book, he describes the exact concept. When he died, he came across a beautiful girl, and that girl guided him. Concept that was promoted by Arda-e-Viraf so many years ago. So that girl stayed with him, and he talks about the concept of the soul staying with the body for 4 days. So he said that for 4 days, for 3 days actually, for the 4th morning something happens. For the first 3 days, the soul stays on top of the body, just there somewhere nearby. And then on the 4th day, he says that he went to the Chinvat bridge, a bridge that was wide or narrow in proportion to your deeds. The good deeds makes it wider, and otherwise it makes it narrower. So it's like the huge highway that if you drive here, if you're a holy person, well, if you're not, then maybe a wire or something, and then you fall in hell. That's the concept. So remember, the concepts that we as Zarathustrians believe today are concepts that were written by Arda-e-Viraf in his Arda-e-Viraf Nameh. That's the concept we think today as our traditions and as our beliefs. So he came to that Chinvat bridge, and then from Chinvat bridge onwards, he was escorted by Zoroastrianism as his escorter and his guide. So he first went to a place called Hamistagan. Hamistagan is purgatory, a place which is neither heaven nor hell. Who lives there? So there were souls there, and then he asks Zoroastrianism to explain, why is this guy here? So, and Zoroastrianism would explain to him that this is the reason why this soul is in purgatory. So there were 3 tracks there in purgatory. So first track is a star track, not the Star Trek Next Generation, but it's Star Trek. That's called a Humata Star Trek. And the way it's described is, this place is a star trek. And those of the souls who in the world offered no prayers, chanted no Gathas, and contracted no next-to-kin marriages, they have also exercised no sovereignty, no rulership. Through their good thoughts, they have become pious. Meaning that these people, they never did anything else, but they did good work, good thoughts. Because their thoughts were good, they were in that purgatory, because they didn't do anything else. They did not say any prayers, they didn't do any gathas, etc. But they were good, at least they thought well. Then the second track is the good words track, and the third one is good deeds. So that was purgatory. And then what was it like over there? So he describes it as a place where it's neither hot nor cold. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. It's in between. It's nothing permanent. It's sort of always transient. So then the question arises, who gets there? Because people should go either to heaven or to hell. Why to purgatory? So whose good deeds and bad deeds are equal tend to go to this purgatory, this place, Amistagar. How do we judge them? How do we judge the deed? For example, if you committed a crime and you did a good deed, you helped a senior cross the road, but you killed someone. Now, would that offset killing someone that you help a senior cross the road? We don't know. How do you measure? Is there any weight assigned to a certain deed or certain misdeed? There are no measurements. But what Arda-e-Viraf says is, yes, there is a measurement. And he says, for everyone whose good works are 3 Zoroastrianism more than his sins, goes to heaven. What is Zoroastrianism? So Zoroastrianism is 1 dirham and 2 mads. What is that? Well, it was a measuring system in those days. So if your good deeds are more in a measuring system of those days than your bad deeds, then you go to heaven. If it's the other way, you go to hell. And if it is a balance, well, then you go to this place, purgatory. Okay. So that was purgatory. Then Arda-e-Viraf says that Zoroastrianism took him to heaven. Now he was in heaven. And he describes heaven. So he says, when he went to heaven, Ervad Mirza, the great geometrician of the universe, greeted him. Ervad Mirza lived there. He also met holy angels. Ervad Mirza's helpers were there. He also met Gayomard, the first king, the first prophet. Zarathustra himself was there. Gathas was there, he says. Jamas was there. Other well-doers of the religion were there as well. All those important people were in heaven, he says. So what was happening there? They were feasting, they were enjoying life. People who chanted Gathas were there. People who were steadfast on their good monotheistic religion were there. Souls of pious people were there. There were good rulers, kings were there. Truth seekers were there. There were souls of women who honored water, who honored fire, who honored earth, trees, cattle were there. And there is one more thing he says, and this is him saying, I am not saying it, if you have any issues, take it up with him when you meet him in heaven. He says, good wives to their husbands. So women who were good wives to their husbands were in heaven. Now, I am not saying it. Well, that comes later. That comes later. Well, we are expected to be. There were warriors. There were soldiers. People who gave their life for their country were in heaven. There were killers of noxious animals. In those days, a punishment for someone was to go and kill some animal that would harass humans. So people who killed noxious animals were there. There were moral farmers. Farmers who did farming ethically were there. There were herdsmen who looked after their cattle well were there. What were they doing? They were dressed in gold and silver. They were happy. They were feasting. And it was calm and sublime. It was a beautiful place, he says. Beautiful place. Then it was time for them to go to hell. Hell, go and visit hell to see what was happening there. So then Zoroastrianism took him to hell. He found people punished for their various sins. Now, if you read Arda-e-Viraf Nameh, maybe about 7 or 8 paragraphs devoted to heaven, about 70 paragraphs devoted to hell. Okay, well, that shows you the importance. So he found a man who kept on measuring dust and ashes. That's all he kept on doing. He measures dust and ashes. So he asked Zoroastrian, what's going on? Why is he doing this? This guy, he cheated in measurements. Yeah. He did not keep true bushels, gallons, or weights while he was alive. He put dust in grains. He put water in wine and charged higher prices. So his punishment was, keep on measuring. Then there was this guy in a little room, and he was naked. But in the closet, there were clothes, beautiful clothes. So he said, well, what's going on here?